And now welcome to the microphone, Dr. Marimba Ane.
Hotel family, we're home to sing. Trying to think of my Gikuyu. I'm glad to be here with you and for this occasion, because this is something that is not only dear to my heart, but it's my life. It's what I do. And brother talked about if this could be tightened, it would be good. That'll just stay up. That if you really want to honor a person that we love and who loved us, then what you do is you try to do what they did, or what, let me put it this way, what they wanted you to do. And in this case, that's what I'm doing. Henrik Clarke was my teacher. First, I want to thank, as people have, the organizations that organized this. And that means all the people that, you know, did what we call the hard work. Sometimes we call it the dirty work. But it's the good work, the clean work. And that's Semotat and BAPA. Because it is very, very important that we be consistent. And that's been one of our challenges as a people. If we are to be powerful politically in terms of what we're able to bring forth and make happen, then we've got to be consistent in the work. It's not enough to say the rhetoric of it, you know, the words that everybody claps for. But you gotta be there when nobody's looking, and you have to do that from year to year to year. And so I thank those organizations for doing this, for honoring Nana John Henrik Clarke for all the years that they've done that, and for this occasion to happen today. So let's give them a thank you. And one of the things that people have repeated is that Dr. Clarke loved us. That's very important, because the work that he did, you have to think about it. You know, you're thinking, oh, how could he do all that he did? How could he keep doing what he did? It came from love. The political organizing that we do, it comes from love. It doesn't come from, they'll talk to you about, oh, they hate white people. It's not about that. It's about this deep, deep love that we have for our people, for African people. And that's what Nana Clarke gave to us. You will hear me referring to him as Nana. And Nana is one of the highest terms of respect that we can give for our people that comes from us. The term, as I know it, that comes out of Ghana in West Africa, but Nana is actually used in other parts of Africa. And so, in my relationship to him, I call him Nana John Henrik Clarke, so as not to confuse you. One of the things that I do in my work is African spiritual practice, is African spiritual warfare, which brings together what is naturally together, and that is our spiritual being with the need for victory of our people. That is, the political and the spiritual are one. That's my life. That's what I do. And in doing that, what I focus on in my spiritual practice is ancestor communion. African ancestor communion is our connectedness and relationship to our ancestors. I specifically focus on our warrior ancestors, and then specifically within that, Nana John Henrik Clarke. So for me to do this, to speak here today, is actually me fulfilling my spiritual practice of ancestor communion. Because that relationship between the ancestors and us is one that is reciprocal. That is, we get strength from them, but only because we also strengthen them by honoring them. So they strengthen us, we strengthen them. That's called reciprocity. And that's what's happening here today. This is a very political event in that it talks about the need for organization and activism, and it is a very spiritual event because it is about ancestor communion and honoring one of our greatest ancestors. So that's kind of a prelude to what I'm going to be doing. The other thing that's going to be a little different, I think, is that people know Nana Clarke as a teacher, a master teacher, as someone said. He was my teacher. Know him as an historian, as a culturalist, all of these things. The influence that he had on me was as a Pan-African sovereignist. And so what I will be doing actually is using his words, quotes primarily from him, which reflect an aspect of his teachings, his life, that we don't always emphasize. One of the things that it means to be a warrior is that you confront the enemy, that you continually confront, not just sometimes, not just once, but that you live a life of confrontation with that which seeks to destroy the people that you love. And so Nana John Henrik Clarke was a warrior who constantly confronted the hard issues of what we need to do in order to organize for our people. And that's what I want to focus on today. To be a warrior, you can't be comfortable. Not going to be comfortable. To be a warrior, you can't be safe. So you can't say the things that are just going to keep you safe and that everybody agrees with, everybody likes. But you're going to have to say some things that shake people up. And I want to bring that out today, the extent to which Nana Clarke did that. Also by way of prelude, so to speak, I want to say that he is my ideological father, and that he taught me so much. But what I'm realizing now is that he's still teaching me, that I'm hearing the things that he was always saying, reading the things that he said, but I must be hearing them with new ears. Because as I think I'm growing, that I'm pushing this envelope to where it needs to go, I realize he's the one who taught me that. And so that's what I will be showing as well today. So to begin with, this is, as you can see, you will be seeing the screen for the PowerPoint. This is an homage, praises to my ideological father. One of the things that I'm going to be talking about is African sovereignty, and I'm going to be using that word and again and again, because I think that we need to kind of change the language. We need to up the ante. We need to not just repeating that which has become comfortable, but we need to have a plan, a program, an agenda, which says to us, this is what we're living for. And this is what we will die for if necessary, some of us. So let's look at that. The word resistance, rebellion, powerful term that our ancestors were involved in, that Nana Clarke taught us about. And then we talk about freedom. Well, what started happening to me was that I teach the children, as Dr. McIntosh said, in AHAP, African Heritage After School Program. And Mama Jerry Gregg knows about AHAP because her children were in AHAP. If you say, okay, what do our people need? They say freedom. And I said, let's not just, I'm not leaving you there. The reason is because that's too easy. You don't have to think to say that. And you don't have to explain, well, what does that mean? You're talking about freedom to integrate. You're talking about freedom to do your own thing. Wear anything you want. Say anything you want. That's not what our people need. So we need to take that further in terms of definition, liberation. Yes, we need to be liberated from this prison that we are in. Anything that keeps us from doing what is best for our people. But if we take all of that and we add onto it what Marcus Mosiah Garvey told us, we put government on that, then we got sovereignty. What we need is our own government. Let's be specific, because you say sovereignty and then people are like, well, what are you really talking about? So I want to make that clear today. In order to have sovereignty, we need a nation concept. We need to have a land that is ours, based in our homeland. That doesn't mean that we don't have something someplace else, but it means we need a base. That's what Garvey told us. We need to have total control over our resources. What we're doing now is defining sovereignty. We need self-reliance. Nana Clarke told us that. We can't spend our money, consume all these things, say that we need all of this, and not produce it ourselves. He told us really what self-reliance was, that we needed to be able to make everything that we consume. self-determination. All of these things are part of African sovereignty, defining for ourselves who we are. Ujamaa, which is African familyhood. Repeat that. Ujamaa means African familyhood. And out of that base of the family, we build a system of distribution and exchange and resource development, which has been called economics. It's based in familyhood. That's what Ujamaa is. And that's what Nyerere meant by Ujamaa. We need an African spiritual system which is based on the connection to our ancestors. That's what connects us. That's why we are a people, is because we have the same ancestors, y'all. That's a powerful concept which is cultural, historical, biological, and it is political. We need a vision, and that we've been lacking. A vision of an African-defined future. The vision of an African-defined future. You see, that goes beyond even talking about liberation. Because when you say liberation, which we need, but it's liberation from something. African sovereignty is taking that and adding more, which Garvey added, which is that you have a vision that comes from us of why we need to be liberated, what it is that we want to build. Our youth, our children need that. Gotta have self-defense, y'all. We gotta organize for self-defense. It makes no sense for us to build anything and not be able to defend it. Okay? We're gonna see where Henrik Clarke talked about all of this. So that we have to build a powerful African army. And what should happen is that every child that is born to us knows that they are conscripted into that army. To be born African is to be born part of that army. You see, that's how serious we have to become. And that's what we mean by African sovereignty. I want to say something, do this very quickly. I was talking about us defining our terms and understanding what we're talking about, because one of the things that happens to us now is we'll use a term and then have 100 different interpretations of that term. And that makes for confusion in our political movement. Freedom. This is by Baba Asa G. Hilliard III, who is also Nana Bafore. Listen to what he says about freedom. He said, our first mistake was that we thought of freedom as a place. Think about that. Rather than as a continuation of a struggle. Tyranny never sleeps. So it's not like you get something and then you got it and everything is cool. Our second mistake was that we thought of freedom as a goal. We want freedom, rather than as a launching pad from which to reach our goals. So our goals have got to be beyond white power. It's got to be beyond what they do to us. It has to be our vision of what it is we want. Without purpose, freedom hardly matters. Our third mistake was that we thought that freedom made us free. You hear that? That, however, is mere license. You can do whatever you want to do. That ain't political. He says it's not freedom at all. And finally, freedom is being shackled, tied, so that you can't get loose to identity, purpose, and direction, and being in constant pursuit. So I wanted to share with you that those thoughts from one of our warrior ancestors, Baba Asa Hilliard, because it points to the fact that what Nana John Henrik Clarke was trying to do, and was always doing, was teaching us to think carefully, and to think politically, and to think in terms of power. So therefore, if we're just using words and using them loosely, and it makes us feel good that we can come and sit and hear somebody say certain words, yeah, freedom, so forth, that ain't helping us. What Nana Clarke did was to always push us to think, and to think about what it is we should be doing. I'm going to go quickly over this, but one of the things that Nana Clarke taught us about, most of these things, he's the first person who taught me, but this is about the sovereign nations in West Africa. And the point here is that there was a concept of African sovereignty. We had that. And so what we need to do now is what? We got to reclaim it. We're not creating it out of a hat somewhere, but this is something that we had, and we need to study it. And Nana Clarke would always teach us about Ghana, Songhai, Bali, and so forth. African sovereignty is black power. We need an army. That picture that you see there is of, I think, the African Legion within the UNIA. Y'all can correct me. Why do we need that? Why do we need sovereignty? Because we need power. And what is power? Power gives you the ability to exact sanctions. What are sanctions? It's like punishment and reward, y'all. Y'all do something to my people, then I got a problem with that. And there's a price that you gotta pay for it. That's exacting sanctions. Also, we have the ability to reward those Africans who do what they need to be doing in the interest of African people. So the power to exact sanctions, the power to protect our children. So I say to you, well, what is this sovereignty thing? What is African sovereignty? Can we now protect our children? If Urugu, some call the devil, decided tomorrow that it was in their interest to re-enslave African people, could we stop that? Why? Because the reason we couldn't is because we don't have the organization, the structure, or the clarity about who we are and what we need to do. So African sovereignty makes it real clear that we got to be able to protect our children. We got to be able to say never again. But we got to be able to back that up with power, with black power, with black global power. So we have to think globally. African sovereignty is the power of governance. We have a right to govern ourselves without anybody interfering with that. The power to do ma'at and to seek vindication. Now ma'at, people think of ma'at as peace. Ma'at is also about exacting justice. Ma'at is about justice. It's up to us to make that happen. All of that is African sovereignty. So only through African sovereignty can we guarantee that we will not be re-enslaved. It's Nana Clarke that taught me that. Marcus Mosiah Garvey, Africa for Africans at home and abroad. Let's make it clear, y'all, what we mean, what we mean. I want to show you this. How many people have heard of the Citadel? I went recently and actually saw it. How many people have seen it? Good. I need to talk to you. Citadel, at the time that it was built, and I think it's about 1811. This says between 1805 and 1820, but I think Christophe finished it in 1811, was the largest fortress in the Western Hemisphere. 1811, Henrik Clarke was a master builder. And what he did was to make sure that the plans of Dessalines were carried out. I have seen this incredible structure. It is a symbol of African sovereignty, but it is a well-kept secret so that our people here, who are the conscious people, have never heard of it. You understand what I'm saying? This is the kind of thing that Nana John Henrik Clarke would teach us about, the citadel in Haiti. Nana Clarke was uncompromising. Oh, I'm sorry, the next slide, please. If anybody's back there. Somebody remind, okay, there we are. Everything that touches your life should be an instrument of your liberation, or you must throw it into the trash can of history. He didn't say one thing in your life. He said everything. What does that mean? That means that your life is committed to this radical, revolutionary change that needs to happen if our people are to be sovereign. That's what he's saying. And he was uncompromising in that. He was uncompromising in that. Hear me clearly. What about education? We've misunderstood what education is all about. We have adopted an academic definition of education. Maybe we shouldn't even use that word anymore. So we're looking at whether our children can read, write, do arithmetic, all of that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be able to do that. But that's not what African education is all about. And that's not what we need now alone. There has to be a reason for our children to be learning that. What did Nana Clarke say? People don't seem to pay attention to. He said the purpose, the one honorable purpose of our education has got to be to train us to be handlers of power. Going too fast on the, oh, what happened? Okay, I'm sorry. Cool. Everybody can see that? Can you read it? Education has but one honorable purpose, that is to train the student to be a proper handler of power. That's a powerful statement, y'all. He wasn't just talking. He was giving us a blueprint. He was helping us to think as African people, politically, about what we needed to do. It wasn't rhetoric. But have we used his definition of education? Have we thought in terms of power? My job here is not to beat up on us for what we haven't done. It's to say, look, we've been told, let's do it. Let's get to work. So anybody talking about education among our people and for our children need to be thinking in terms of power. That, by the way, is a picture. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's a picture of a school, Mwamko wa Siasa, that existed in 1983, 84 in Harlem. And one of those little people in the very front with her hand up is my daughter, Jifa. exercise of African power. How do you use a power? You need the power. And then how do we use it? We must look into education for nation management. He told us this. That's sovereignty. We have to educate our people, our children, so that they are able to manage a nation. How much do we talk about that when we talk about education? He was very specific. Nation management is our only hope. Nation management is our only hope. He's not doing rhetoric here. He's not saying, oh, we want freedom. No, he's being very specific about this concept of a world nation of African people. What is a nation? A nation is an entity that is organized around fulfilling the needs of its people. It's an organization, y'all. Henrik Clarke told us that's what we needed. Next one. African education for self-reliance. Every form of true education prepares the student for self-reliance, not to get a doctorate, not to get a great job with a whole lot of money. That's not what he was saying. He was very specific. He said for self-reliance. So the picture here is of one of the stores that the UNIA had and the ACL under Marcus Mosiah Garvey. It's not like we didn't do this. It's been done. We have done it. And we need to do it again. We listened to Henrik Clarke. He looked at Booker T. Washington, which people missed. Let's go to the back. I want to read that about Booker T, the one before this. If you could do that, Booker T. Washington is before. Yes, thank you. Developed an educational system that was good then and it's good now. Had we followed that system and paid respect to him, you would never see a white plumber in a black neighborhood. How many people have had to use white plumbers or thought they did? Because we would have our own. If you live in a brick house, what should you be able to do? You should have a brick yard. If you wear leather shoes, tan your own leather and make them. That is self-reliance. He was serious. He wasn't just talking. This is from the UNIA, the Negro Factories Corporation. Listen to this. I don't know how many people can read it. The heading says, "At last the day has come." Then under that, it says, Negro, we'll say black. Black money, black brains, black energy must rule the world. Should I repeat that? Oh, that's a bit much for y'all. I tell them, you want to know what I want? I want it all. We did that once, and we will do that again. But it can only happen if we believe in it, and if we do the work, and if we think. Listen to people like Marcus Mosiah Garvey and Nana John Henrik Clarke. Black money, black brains, black energy must rule the world. Now this is in 1920, this is being said. Nana Clarke, this has been alluded to before. This is quote, incredible quote. Powerful people never educate powerless people in how to take their power away from them. So what are we doing with our children? Where are we sending them? And what do we expect them to learn? They will learn how to be subservient to the white power structure. Nana Frances Cress Welsing says that in the system of white supremacy, we are functionally powerless. And that's all we'll ever be in that system. She says we don't even count in that system. We are zero. Nana Clarke says, and there's this picture of these missionaries with black children around on the ground, sitting like they are going to educate us in how to kill them, actually. Now, he talked also, he was real. Nana Clarke didn't say what made people feel like, what made people feel comfortable, all right? That wasn't his job. He said, and he's warning us about using terms and not really knowing what they mean. He's warning us about what I would call meaningless rhetoric. He said, we shouted nation time too soon. What does he mean? African people need to stop shouting nation time until what? Until they are clear about the responsibilities of running a nation. That was big for him, is that with nation came responsibility. And that's one of the reasons why we run away from nation building. Because it's gonna mean that we gotta be responsible, that we gotta be accountable to ourselves, and that we gotta look at how we treat each other. You see? But right now, we can blame anything bad on Yoruba, on a white man. Because we don't have our own structures of responsibility and accountability. And he says that that's what nation time is about. And we gotta think that through and understand it, and then we gotta make it happen. Listen to this, because he actually describes the meaning of African sovereignty. We need a railroad system stretching across Africa, and we need to build it now. We need to have mining engineers and metal specialists to get the ore from the African earth. We do not need to buy the rails from the outside. Everything needs to come from inside of Africa itself. We need a rapid transportation system in Africa that would take 100 years to complete. So that means we need to get started. We needed to have gotten started. We were talking about African independence back in the 1950s. It's very important that Nana Clarke was saying that then. He is saying it to us now, but are we looking at the condition of Africa now? Who owns the resources in Africa now? You have any idea? I don't hear any voices. I don't hear anybody. The oil, the cobalt, the timber, who owns it? Everybody but the Africans. Because they understood the value. They got their engineers in there. But they aren't teaching Africans to be engineers. Because powerful people, what? They don't teach the powerless how to take their power away. So what do we have to do? We have to study engineering. We have to get our children to do. We have to focus on reclaiming the resources in Africa that belong to us. And we gotta kick out those who Nana Clarke said were either, what does he say, invaders or descendants of invaders. All of them. But to do that takes a certain mentality, and that mentality is sovereignist thinking. You see, that's real Pan-Africanism. The laws of nation consciousness are the laws of responsibility. Notice he keeps talking about responsibility. We are not going to save ourselves until we are conscious of nation responsibility and nation building. We are not going to save ourselves as individuals. You want to talk about any progress, people talking about progress since slavery and so forth, that could only be on an individual basis, and then it ain't no real progress. He said, we're going to do it as a collective or it happen. We're going to have to be bold enough. Now listen to this. Even if we have to break our own hearts to find out where we went wrong. So Nana Clarke is talking about serious coming together, thinking, and making these things happen that come into our mind. That is having a vision, to be committed to that vision. A vision of African sovereignty. That's what he's talking about. And in order to do that, that means analysis. That means a sharing of deep thought in terms of our people, who we are, and where we need to go. That hasn't been happening enough yet. But that's what Nana Clarke was calling for. He was the first person to teach me about Marcus Mosiah Garvey. He says Marcus Garvey was about nation building. He was about consciousness. He wasn't about integrating into somebody else's house. What was he about? Building his own. That's self-reliance, okay? That's African sovereignty. And then Nana Clarke really believed this. He felt it deeply in here, what it meant to be African-centered. We use that term and that concept, and it has come to just mean that you got African people who are studying African history, or, I'm not sure what it means, but it don't mean politically what it needs to be. For him, it was his heart. Africa is our center of gravity, our cultural and spiritual mother and father, our beating heart, no matter where we are on the face of this earth. That is a statement from Nana John Henrik Clarke, and you understand why he worked to do the work that he did. Was because that was his heart. Africa was his heart, and Africa is us. Africa just isn't, 1,000 miles away in another continent. Africa is us, where we are. And that's what he taught us. Anybody who learned from him learned that we are a world people. He would always say that. It took me forever to understand what he really meant by it. The total liberation of Africa must involve a commitment from all the Africans on the face of the earth. The total liberation of Africa involves a commitment of all of us wherever we are on the face of this earth. That was the depth and the extent of his feeling for what we call, say, African studies, Black studies, and different organizations and so forth. For him, it was his entire life, and this was his reason. He said that we had a responsibility. Each generation must assume the responsibility of securing their manhood, their womanhood, their definition of their being on this earth. Each generation must do that. That, in the final analysis, is nationhood. That's nationhood. It's us assuming that responsibility and also defining that responsibility of who we are, why we were put here. What is the meaning of your existence as an African person? And it's what he said before, which is the total liberation of African people so that we can build and reclaim African sovereignty. That's what Nana Clarke taught us. Now this is an extremely important quote. Listen carefully. Because he was throwing out a challenge, the gauntlet, to everybody, every Black person who called themselves a leader. I think every person that calls themselves a leader, a preacher, a policy maker of any kind should ask and answer the question in his or her own lifetime. How will my people stay on this earth? That is not guaranteed, y'all. Our continued existence as a people is not guaranteed. I could give a whole nother lecture on the eugenics movement, population control, and so forth. Francis Cress Welsing talked about the white supremacy system, racism, what it really was. And let me tell you, their objective is to exterminate black people. It sounds extreme to you. You don't really believe it because you don't want to believe it. Because if you believed it, then you would be at war, and we would organize ourselves for a war. So he's saying every leader must ask that. How will my people stay on this earth? How will they be educated? How will they be housed? How will they be fed? And very importantly, how will they be defended? How many leaders get up and say that? Or do we have leaders at this point in time? We've got to be real. And we, the people, have to make demands on those who are the organizers. You said, hey, wait a second. You didn't say what your vision was for African people. You didn't say what your plan was for our defense. You didn't say what your plan was for how we're going to stay on this earth. You got to be able to ask that. And you got to be able to think about it. Because Henrik Clarke was a man of the African people. He taught everybody, like Malcolm, anywhere. You stop him, he would talk to you for an hour. Because that's how much he knew, but that's also how deeply he thought. Okay. The answer to these questions will create the concept of enduring nationhood, because it creates the concept of enduring responsibility. Are African people ready for the 21st century? Are we preparing to be free men and women, masters of our destiny, or will we continue in the programmed dependency that has been our lot for the past 500 years? Think about that, you all. He's putting it to us, and that's what he did. He says, I am saying, whatever the solution is, either we are in charge of our own destiny or we are not in charge. You don't have an in-between. Either we're in charge or we're not in charge. So what's the deal? Are we in charge of our own destiny right now? You got to think about that. He said, on that point, we've got to be clear. You're either free or what? Or you're a slave. You don't want to hear that. Put it to us. So African sovereignty means, and that's my thing, is the African sovereignty movement. And I get this from Henrik Clarke, and that's what I'm organizing. That's what we're organizing. That movement is having our own house, being in charge of our own destiny, having nation responsibility, Pan-Africanism or perish. Now this quote is something everybody here should memorize, take home with you. Without the African connection, that's Pan-Africanism, we are a disjointed people begging for entry into somebody else's house. I don't care how you put it. Don't talk about empowerment, because empowerment means within somebody's system. And it's a way of not dealing with power. So you use the term empowerment. It's about power, y'all. And don't be afraid to say that. The Haitian Revolution must be studied, lifted up, raised up. And it is what he called for, which is African World Revolution. Those are not my words. Those are Henrik Clarke's words. African World Revolution. Read his book. Up, you mighty race. You can accomplish what you will. Madasi, thank you.